everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. We've got a beautiful fall morning for you. Sun's just creeping above the horizon. It's mid-October, and I just launched the kayak onto some saltwater flats. It was actually kind of a long carry across the flats to get here, but I'm here and I'm launched, and this is real skinny water. We've got some minus tides. That just means on a tide chart, if you look at it, there's a minus side sign near the lows. And this happens around the new moon and the full moon. Sometimes they can be pretty extreme tides, like king tides in the fall and again in the spring. And you get these situations where all the water gets sucked out of the flats and then comes rushing back in because the tide change still happens in the same time frame, that just the extremes of the tides are larger. And stripers and other fish kind of like that sort of thing when the current's pulling harder, etc. You can also get situations where some bait is trapped, which happened a bunch on this trip. And it was interesting. It's kind of late in the season for the striper run here, and the space between schools of stripers is getting wider. So sometimes you hit it and it's a bunch of fish, and the next couple days you go out, no fish at all. And that's just because they're migrating south now. I'm just getting myself rigged up, but there's a bunch of birds around me, and they've got bait trapped in this real skinny water here. But it's too skinny for the fish to be on the bait too. I mean, they'd have their backs out of the water, and they just don't feel comfortable because larger birds can pick them off. There's a few ospreys still around, great blue herons, maybe some eagles, but they're just vulnerable to predators when they're in water this skinny and it's light out. So they typically don't go into super shallow stuff like this. The other thing is that they could risk beaching themselves, and stripers are pretty smart about that. They usually won't beach themselves. Unlike something like bunker or menhaden, they'll beach themselves if they get spooked from predator fish. Anyway, I've got two rods with me, and the main lure I'm going to be using is an Albie Snacks. I just had I think it was spook tied on the other rod. And if I only had one rod, fresh or salt, this would be it. It's a TFO 7.6 medium power rod. It's called the TFO Professional, and they just came out with a new series, a new revision of that series of rods. I haven't tried the new one yet, but the old one is just fantastic. It's got a true moderate fast bend to it, so it has a little bit more give than a rod that was a super fast or extra fast rod. And I really like that. It's good for protecting lighter leaders or lighter mainline. It's good for casting unweighted soft plastics, which I'm going to be doing today with the Albie Snacks. It's good for so many things. So if I could only have one rod, this would be it, fresh or salt. The guys at Salt Strong did a review on it, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, and it was highly rated by them. I think that's how I found out about it. And I'd have to agree with everything they said. It's a great rod for salt, but it's also a great rod for freshwater. And I've fished everything from weightless flukes with it to topwater. It's a great topwater rod. So if you're on a budget and you fish both freshwater and saltwater, or you don't have a lot of space to store a bunch of rods, this is a great choice because you can do so much with it. From stripers to bluefish to albies and bonito, black sea bass, scup, tog. I mean, pretty much anything that I would fish for in saltwater, this will cover it. It's not a surf rod, so it's not going to throw, a 4-ounce pencil. It's just, that's not what it's going to do. But it could fish sluggos up to 7.5 inches, unweighted sluggos. The 9-inch sluggo would be kind of tough. Maybe it's possible, but I wouldn't try it on this rod. But just for all around saltwater, at least in New England where I fish, inshore waters, kayak accessible. Look at that, I almost got stuck on that little sandbar. The rod's just awesome. Now, freshwater, it's not ideal for everything. But like I said, I've fished a ton of it in freshwater too. Jerk baits, topwater poppers, unweighted flukes, that sort of thing. I mean, you could throw a Senko on it. I know a lot of people like to throw Senkos. You could do all kinds of stuff with this rod. And for the reel, I think the Salt Strong guys recommended the Daiwa Fuego. Now for me, the Fuego is great as long as I'm fishing vertically. So in freshwater, that would be drop shot. In saltwater, that would be something like jig and crab, or jig and a spoon, or something like that. And for that, I think the Fuego's great. It's got a good drag, has some sealing in there. For me, I like the Shimano 3000 Ultegra. You could put a Stratic on there. Anything from the Ultegra and up has the long stroke spool. And as long as you're careful with the reel and don't dunk it, don't hang it over the side while you're paddling, that kind of stuff, it's fine. And the long stroke spool and the just the superior line winding makes it cast, I don't know, 5 or 10% further than the Daiwa Fuego. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're trying to reach fish, it really does help to have that long stroke spool. I think it matches the rod pretty well. It's super smooth. I tend to have less wind knots casting it than with a Daiwa Fuego. And I think that's because of the even line wrapping. I mean, the original idea for that long stroke spool, I think, was from Daiwa. They had the SS series, the 700, 1300, 2600. And those were great reels. They had an even 5-degree cross wrap on the long stroke spool. And it really made a difference at the time. This is going back 20, 30 years. It really made a difference in casting ability. Because at the time, a lot of spinning reels had like a simple locomotive level wind, which didn't wrap the line on the spool evenly, and it led to more problems. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too deep in the weeds here. I got a fish. That's a small striper on an Albie Snacks. I'm fishing the sand eel color Albie Snacks with a 4/0 BKK Titan hook, unweighted. I'm in super skinny water, so the unweighted version works fine. I guess he's not that small. He's schoolie sized striper. What was interesting is that, after I caught that fish and held it up for the camera, there's a bunch of fly guys around, and they were fishing like a channel in the flats. I didn't see them catching anything, but when I caught that fish, they all started kind of migrating over. There's the Albie Snacks. They all started migrating over in my general direction. So I'm going to get a few more casts in before I get swarmed by 5 or 6 fly guys, and you'll be able to see them on video, creeping towards me. And I don't really mind. They're kind of limited with where they can go because they can't cross some of these channels. They can't cross to the other side. And there's more fish around for me. But to be honest, at this time of year, there was a lot more birds and bait than there were fish. And usually it's not that much trouble for me to go find more fish. But on this trip, I thought I'd run into some more active fish, and I really didn't. What I ran into was birds on bait and not so many fish on bait. Anyway, I'm pausing right there to make sure I don't interfere with the fly guys. Anyway, the hook is the BKK Titan, the 4/0, and the reason for that is because the 4/0 Albie Snacks hook, if you get a big striper on it, it'll bend straight out. I learned that the hard way. So I can't recommend the Albie Snacks hooks. I don't know who makes them. I don't know if they get them overseas or what, but the steel is really soft. I mean, you could take it in your hands if you had gloves on or something and just bend that hook straight out. So, yeah, BKK Titan 4/0, or you could use an Owner Beast 4/0. The Titan has a silicone keeper on it to keep the Albie snacks up on the bait. Sometimes after a bunch of fish, the plastic gets worn out, makes kind of a hole in the bait, and the bait starts slipping down the hook. That little silicone gripper helps keep it in position, and you can fish the same bait longer. The other thing I do sometimes is I'll replace the keeper with Owner CPS spring lock keeper, either the medium or the large size, and that helps these Albie snacks to last longer, or any soft plastic. So I'm fishing really, it's kind of a cut in the flats, and this was a place where I saw some birds congregating and diving on bait, but it wasn't until I got a little bit further out from the birds that I actually ran into fish. And I saw them popping bait first, or I heard them first, and then I saw them, and then I had a general idea where this little pod of stripers was. And I was able to catch one, and then I lost another. I think I had another short, not get the hook very well. I think he was a little small to get his whole mouth around the bait, but that's okay. But as you can, I don't know if you can see all that well, but in the top left corner, the sun's kind of blocking, but there's some fly guys getting closer and closer to me, and they're a little bit closer than it looks on video. So I'm just going to take a few more casts, and being careful not to mess up their casting. They're fishing shallower. There, you can see more of them now. There's 3 or 4 in view, and I think there was 5 or 6 total. Anyway, as I'm catching fish, they're moving closer and closer to me. But they were fishing in tight, in real skinny water where there was bait and birds, but not too many fish. And so, as they get closer to me and there's another fish. And every time I hook up with a fish or land a fish, they get closer. Now, I understand, there wasn't a ton of fish around, so they were eager to get in on the action, and I don't blame them. So anyway, I was looking around for another fish or a bunch of fish, and I saw one single V in real skinny water, and this fish was big enough to push a V wake. I know it was kind of hard to see. But I could see it, and I tried to lead the fish. He was swimming away from me, and he might have been able to hear me paddling or feel the kayak, but anyway, he was going away from me, and I tried to lead him. I think I must have put it right on his nose, because I basically just had a chance to twitch the bait, and he was on it. I really didn't have to do much at all. And this is a better striper. He's pulling me around a little bit. And I don't know, I'm in about 18 inches of water. And there really just isn't a lot of water for him to, I'm checking to see if I'm recording there. I'm a terrible YouTuber, but I'm getting better. Anyway, there's nowhere for him to really go. I've got 15-pound Berkley X9 braid as the main line, and 20-pound Berkley Big Game mono leader. And as long as he doesn't wrap me around some random rock or ghost pod or something, I can just let him pull me around in the skinny water until he gets tired. Which is kind of my plan here. He's much bigger than the last fish. And he's pushing a lot of water. What I didn't see was a bunch of fish in this size class. I ran over some other fish, and they were in skinny water, but they weren't interested in feeding. I don't know if they were moving between locations as the tide ran out or what, but they didn't seem too interested in eating, and I couldn't fool any of them. I could get a couple to follow, but they really weren't interested in chewing. This one was the first one I encountered that was interested in eating the bait. Yeah, he's probably low 30s, inches, not pounds. Which for this kind of tackle and this rod is a great match. So if this rod, the 7.6 medium TFO Professional, can handle a striper like this, it can handle pretty much anything that you're likely to encounter in freshwater. You know, maybe not a 200-pound blue catfish or sturgeon or, I don't know, some other crazy thing like alligator gar. But for most people, most places in the country, you'll be good with this rod for almost anything. I finally got my thumb on him after almost botching the landing 2 or 3 times. That BKK hook stuck him pretty well. There he is. Gonna take a picture of that one. I got fleece gloves on because it was a little chilly this morning. My fleece gloves are getting soaked, but I love those fleece gloves. They're White River fingerless fleece gloves, and they come in, I think, 2 sizes: small, medium, and large, extra large. These are the large, extra large, and they're great for anytime the water or the air temperature is in the high 30s when there's not a lot of wind. I can fish comfortably. He tried to go down after I released him. There's no room for him to go down. There he goes. He figured it out. Yeah, those fleece gloves are great. The only thing is that if you dunk them in the water, they will get wet. And usually I carry 2 pairs with me if I'm going to be seriously fishing in the cold for a while. And if one pair gets wet, I'll just put on the other pair. And after that, if it's cold and windy, I'll go with some neoprene stormer gloves or something like that. And if it's really just horrible and miserable and I'm not catching any fish, I'll go home and try another day. But if the fishing's good and it's just cold, I'm going to keep fishing as long as I can keep my fingertips from freezing. Anyway, those fleece gloves are a lifesaver because you can feel everything. You can still feel the line. You can cast great. You can feel when a fish bites. It just keeps your hands from really cutting your trip early. All right, I had a good morning out here fishing from my little yellow kayak. Had some great tides for it too. On the flats, I like the last of the outgoing and the first of the incoming. And a little yellow kayak allows me to get out earlier and stay later than I could if I was in waders or something else like that, where it would be dangerous if you got caught on the other side of a channel when the tide was coming in. You know, a little paddleboard or something like that would be also a good choice on the right day. Notice I'm wearing a full foam life jacket and I've got dry pants on too. They leak, but they keep me alive. Most of the time I was in, I don't know, 18 inches of water to maybe 3 or 4 feet. So worst case scenario, I could stand up most places. But you do have to be a little bit careful. That yellow kayak is great because with all my stuff, it probably weighs 50 pounds. I can carry it across the flats up to about a mile. It's about my limit. Star today was the Albie Snacks and that 7.6 TFO Professional rod. Again, if I could only have one rod, that would be it. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it if you made it this far. Just like all my other videos, I'll put all the gear in the video description so you can duplicate what I was doing out here today. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!